All right, with respect to this channel, just even before we start talking about taxes, one thing that you'll find out is that there's people that may be confused about taxes, and oftentimes they confuse paying taxes with patriotism. And you'll find people say that if you don't pay taxes, you're not patriotic, which couldn't be further from the truth. So I'll try to kind of explain that. And again, this is just going off of looking into the whole taxes thing and finding out really what is the deal with paying taxes. Before I begin, though, the way that I'll move into this is just talking about a channel that I follow, StormCloudsGathering. I really enjoy the guy's channel, and I like a lot of the ideas where he's coming from. In this video that he has, I recommend it. I'll put it down below. He says forced taxation is immoral, and a lot of his arguments are that it goes to essentially the Nazi-like police brutality, the wars, TSA searches, etc. And to some degree, he's right. It's not a tax, though. Our tax money doesn't directly go to funding those things. Where those things get funded from are primarily by loans that we take out to the Federal Reserve, from the Federal Reserve. So it's just, I guess, being too specific, but essentially what we're paying with our taxes is interest on those loans. So I guess the argument could be made is that that's what we're doing with our tax dollars, is funding these types of operations. But what I wanted to point out here to further illustrate this is that if you look at the comments on this channel, you have two people discussing a misconception about taxes, that they go for roads and such. So a gentleman here says, do you drive? Then how the hell are we going to drive on roads? They cost money. And someone responds beneath that, yes, roads cost money, but what should money matter, comrade? Don't you want to work for free and support the American dream? Democracy needs you. But the point he's addressing there is that, why don't you pay your fair share taxes? It's not patriotic that you're not paying your taxes. Further, George Stephanopoulos, if you remember him, he says it's unpatriotic to avoid paying taxes. Or that's like almost a double negative in a sense. He says it's patriotic to pay taxes. But the point that we're finding in that rhetoric is that it's really not patriotic, because all that money isn't going to pay for our government. So let me show you this. In 1982, Ronald Reagan had asked a gentleman by the name of Peter Grace, who was an industrialist / businessman, and a columnist, Jack Anderson, to form a Grace Commission. And the commission studied waste in our government, private sector survey on cost control, and they came up with some pretty astonishing things. I'll put this link below too. But the point is, what they had discovered is essentially that Grace told President Reagan that 1/3 of tax dollars collected are wasted, and another third is not collected. With 2/3 of everyone's personal income taxes wasted or not collected, 100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by the interest on the federal debt and by the federal government contributions to transfer payments. In other words, all individual income tax revenues are gone before one nickel is spent on the services which taxpayers expect from the government. So these monies aren't going to pay for the government. These monies aren't going to pay for roads and such. And the further you look into this, though, the money really comes from IMF loans that goes to pay for our government, the operation of it. And I'm sure there's other areas. But to answer that question about what does pay for our roads and such? Schools, roads, and bridges are not funded by income taxes at all. Property taxes fund schools. Roads and bridges are funded by gas taxes. Airports, sewer, and water systems are funded by user fees. So for anyone who comes up to you and says that if you're not paying your taxes, then what about the roads? What about this? That's the reason why. Because there's other taxes on top of our federal income tax that goes to pay for those things. One thing to remind people is that when the founding fathers and people of that group left Great Britain for the United States for the taxation aspect, and there were other aspects, but they were only being taxed roughly 3%, I believe. So compare that with today's high taxes, and we don't even seem to mind it. We don't even seem to mind that we're paying money. We're being taxed, and we're paying money to pay the Federal Reserve, which is owned by foreign people. So we're actually paying foreigners on interest for our debt. So is that really patriotic? Wouldn't it seem more patriotic not even to pay that and to opt out of that system and fight for the right not for a Federal Reserve to print our money where we have to pay interest on that money? Wouldn't it make more sense for our government to print the money, which is fully capable of doing, and it says so in our Constitution? So that's some of the arguments. That's how you can overcome some of the objections that people present to you. Anyway, talking about taxes and people not paying taxes. Now, this is for the most people that are, quote unquote, in the system. And most people are in the system. I'm still in the system. I'm not out of the system. People that have applied for their UCC1 paperwork to get out of the system, this is not applying to them, but those are very few and far between. But the point is, when you fill out a job application, you give that future employer information that ultimately ends up on your W-2 form. And that includes your dependents, etc. But the point is, when you do get your W-2 form at the end of the year in preparation to file your taxes, your tax return, it's showing you that taxes have already been taken out of your wages. So the idea that you're not paying taxes, tell me who works for an employer where their taxes aren't already taken out. Now, there might be those people that are self-employed, and that's different, or in some other aspect of employment where they have control of that money before they send it out. But the point is, for 99% of people who apply for a job at Wendy's, at some engineering firm, some law firm, some business firm, or whatever, their taxes are taken out already. So they are paying taxes. And at the end of the year, when you file your federal income tax return, either you get a refund on money that they took, which, by the way, you could be setting away in a retirement account, earning money on, interest on, or B, you pay them. And then if you don't choose to pay them, well, then you get levies, you get the liens, you get the hassle from the IRS. However, that amount is often minuscule compared to the amount that they've already withheld. So that money, in this case here in the sample W-2 form, is already taken out and being sent to interest paid on the Federal Reserve loans. Finally, just to end this, and the whole point of this whole video was just to kind of overcome the objections people give about not paying taxes and trying to tie that to being patriotic or not patriotic. But here's a video from, or if you just Google video Aaron Russo, the late Aaron Russo, the guy did a movie called From Freedom to Fascism, and it talks about how there is no law that says you have to pay taxes. Also, there is a lady by the name of Sherry Jackson. She was a former IRS agent who had gone through a similar transformation as many of the people in Aaron Russo's video. In addition to being challenged by a advertisement placed in USA Today and New York Times, saying that if anyone could find a law where Americans have to pay taxes, they'll pay out $50,000. She tried to find that law, and she couldn't find that law. What I'll show in a upcoming video is how the arguments are made for people who owe taxes and people who don't owe taxes in the eyes of the IRS. Because this is a big argument in the whole, well, there is no law that says that. Well, that's true, there is no law that says that. However, there is some case law that says that it's frivolous not to consider all people in this statute as people responsible for paying law. So, while that's kind of vague there, the point is I'll cover that in an upcoming video.